is about choices and about empowerment. So sometimes I will wear my hearing aids. Sometimes I won't. I get the choice.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bolland, and today I welcome Dr. Stephanie W. Cawthon. Stephanie is a disabled author, speaker, and researcher who has published 4 books. She is a professor, an academic leader, and mentor at the University of Texas at Austin. She's come out with a book called Disability is Human. It's one of those books that hit me hard as I started to read it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and in particular, some areas of my life that, while reading the book, just hit home. But the first thing I want to do is say thank you, Stephanie, and certainly thank you to Amanda Ford and Stephen Nugent. They are the ASL interpreters. Thank you so much for being, all of you, for being on the We're Not Stumped podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me. Again, this is my second time with you, and I really enjoyed the last time we were together. I enjoyed your perspective and appreciated your perspective on disability and cultural conversation. So I'm very much looking forward to talking about the book and how it impacted you. And, it impacts me, hits me different each time. Anytime I read a piece of it again, it hits me different. I think anytime you write a book, you need that to be the case, right? And you write the book because you need the book. So that was it for me as well. I'm sure that it's true for other people, other authors as well. You write what it is that you need, what you want to be interviewed about, what you think the community needs, and also for yourself and how you identify in the world. So.
Well, I agree. For those of you that may not have heard the first time Dr. Stephanie Cawthon was on, that was on April 8th, so I would really highly recommend people hear that first episode. But real quick, as a reminder, I'd love to people to understand a little bit more about you and for you to share your story.
Me too. Well, my story's a long one. I feel like, it could take a year, but Anyway, I grew up with hearing loss. So that's my starting point typically when I tell my story. And then over the years, things have shifted and sort of evolved and changed how I experienced that hearing loss and how I engage with the world. I grew up before ASL was really available. So this was back in the 70s. American Sign Language really wasn't out there and easy to access. I most certainly did not have access to that at home or at school. So when I started school, it was more about learning to lip read, sitting in the front of the classroom, really attending visually to the teacher, and connecting with the content and the adults in the room, but not so much my peers or any friends, because they were all back there behind me as I sat in the front of the room. They would comment or chat or have stories, and I would miss that information. I would miss those comments. I really didn't have access to that piece of education or learning or development wise. And what I noticed is that as an academic topic, language development was my first love and language acquisition. When I was reading about how academics often think about how we develop through language and through interaction, I kind of noticed that something was different about that when a person had hearing loss, if a person was deaf or hard of hearing, that impacted those situations differently. And so that also impacted my academic journey. And I was trying to kind of be reflective and take a look and see what we know, what we don't know, and figure out those things. There are a lot of debates about language, there are lots of disputes about what is the best educational practice for deaf and hard of hearing children. And yes, language has a direct impact. And in addition to that, really understanding kind of what it means for social development and identity development, those pieces are huge. That was my starting point. And kind of fast forward till today, 30 some years later, here we are. And I think more broadly now about access in terms of how we understand disability. as a human experience, a human condition, not to be separated out or isolated like in a silo, but more of being part of the human experience. And so what I noticed was that recognizing I moved from acknowledging deaf and hard of hearing folks experience the world differently, but also to what does it mean? What opportunities need to be created? How does the world need to be designed? And kind of make it bigger, make the world bigger as more of like an umbrella space. Everything needs to be bigger, not just, oh, we have this one little thing in a box. This person's deaf and hard of hearing. And so now for me, I direct a research center. I've written books. I am an instructor. I do presentations, workshops. I do a whole host of things. And they are all aligned with a similar goal, trying to encourage people to think about disabilities as not something that's separate, but again, part of who people are and who we are together, not just as individuals.
Very well said. And I want to remind everyone about the book, Disabilities Human. I'm on with Dr. Stephanie Cawthon. And just from a personal perspective, I'm not the youngest person in the world. I was born with one hand. And I think as you go through life, you think, hey, through my experiences at this point in my life, I think I've done it all or seen it all, or my experiences tell me something. But your book made me reflect on parts of my life that maybe I needed to reflect on. And so it really, it hit me hard, and it, in a positive way, certainly in a positive way. So as I give you that feedback, I'm sure you've gotten other feedback about this book, and I can't recommend it enough. I can't recommend this book enough to not only people within the disabled community, but when you look at the broadness of the community, friends, family, coworkers, everyone, in my opinion, needs to read this book. What does it mean for you to get feedback about what you created?
It's very humbling for sure. um, I think it surprises me when disabled people read the book because, I really felt like we already know. Y'all already know. We know disability is human, but maybe we all kind of needed that validation, that kind of aha. We didn't need the aha moment, maybe, but for me and for you, it's just more about empowerment and having people feel empowered. What you feel and what you experience has been validated now, and it's all okay. So my original intent was to write for people who don't know you, who don't have this experience, kind of trying to teach a little bit, have a little teachable moment in this book. But I'm learning through the feedback I'm receiving from folks who have read it. People don't necessarily want to be taught, they want to connect. And that's what they're getting from the book. And so now it makes sense. Like, aha, ha, ha. Of course, disabled people want to read it and connect with each other through the book, just like everybody else.
There's a part in particular, many parts, but you talk about the disability tax, and your story about showing up to a conference 2 hours early, very prepared, asking where your ASL interpreter would be, and for you to find out they weren't there. Like, again, this is part of the book. You need to get the book so you can read it. You do such a great job of explaining it. I didn't realize, though, in my life, how many times that happens to me. So how did you, the disability tax, can you talk about that a little bit and what it means for people?
So, sure, when I think about the energy, the time, the resources, the effort required just to function, whether it's at home, at work, out in the community, wherever you or I or any of us may be, that work has two parts for me. And the first piece is, what's required, just kind of what's out there, the basic level that everyone needs we need to, let's say, drive to the hospital or the clinic to pick up medication, if that's our scenario. Now, fine. But then if you add the time, the energy, the resources, and the effort that is in addition to that, because we experience a disability, or there's a barrier to access, or the access is low to this space or these people, let's say there's no accessible entrance to the hospital or clinic where you're going. Thus, you have to park elsewhere. And then you have to go find whatever other entrance there may be if it's a physical accessibility issue. If there's no way to communicate with the provider, the pharmacist in this scenario, if you want to challenge the bill, like, wait, this is wrong, or hold on, this isn't the right prescription, or wait, I do have insurance, or whatever it is, that is what I consider the disability tax, because it's the effort on top of that. You don't just park at the closest spot, walk up, walk in, get your stuff and leave. There's so much more that goes into it. And that is what I refer to as a disability tax. It's the extra piece on top.
The reason why your story in the book hit home so close is because it's this talking about the presentations and going up in front of an audience. I can't just show up and go up either. I always, it was like you were speaking to me. I show up a couple hours early and make sure that there's a microphone, a stand, preferably an ear type of microphone, because if I have to hold a microphone with one hand, I can't even turn a page or hit a clicker. And that's why it just hit me so much. And when I think about the community as a whole, there is a, what you just explained with just going to get a prescription. It just, yeah, it's so much broader. And that's why I enjoy the book so much. Again, Disability is Human. And I apologize, I'm talking a little bit more than I usually do when I'm doing interviews, but I just want you to know how much your book meant to me. And I want to make sure that people get this book. It's available everywhere, Amazon, everywhere. Another part that you talk about, I'm going to read a quote from your book. Connecting to the humanity of disability can be challenging, particularly in Western culture where we seek to fix or eliminate apparent flaws. That hit home for me too. I, as a person who doesn't wear a prosthetic, I feel the industry sometimes can shame people because, oh, look, you're not whole. What does that whole thing mean to you too? And as you wrote that in your book, what is a broader term or a broader explanation for that fixing of flaws? Because that hit.
I think it's about choices and about empowerment. So sometimes I will wear my hearing aids. Sometimes I won't. I get the choice. I have an option. It's not always functional for me to wear my hearing aid. And sometimes it is not functioning. Sometimes the context doesn't support that. Like at a restaurant, a busy, loud space, forget it. The technology is not good enough to make that a good experience for me. It'll give me a headache. It's too loud. I take them off. I cannot. It doesn't go well for me. And so when I think about disability and support, partnership, and where we give people with disabilities options and how to create accessibility and access to spaces or treatment, and that's part of what you mentioned, it's not a one size fits all situation. It's just not. And so just for me, I explained a couple of options, and communication for deaf of and hard of hearing people is just one example. And that's not a one size fits all either. And then your example, you said you could wear a prosthetic, but you chose not to. That's your decision. I assume. And if you didn't have an option, and because not everyone does, right? I don't know your story, and it could be that it could be cost prohibitive. There are so many things about this these parts of our lives, and often people will say, "Oh, well, why not? Why don't you have a cochlear implant?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" First of all, I wasn't a candidate for that, but to assume that and to ask that, I'm like, "Wait, what?" And I think sometimes people feel like they can take a look at us like closer and make judgments. And I think a big part of it for me I got to a space where I was like feeling more empowered and saying, hold on, that's not their business. And so, there's a couple of pieces to the answer for me.
You asked, I did make the choice to not wear a prosthetic many years ago. I am personally not against them. I think they're fantastic. It just doesn't fit in my personal life. And the more I meet other people within the limb loss community, the more what you said is 100% accurate. If they have the ability to make that choice because of insurance and being able to afford it, they should make the choice and not feel they have to. And so, very well said. Thank you. There's a couple different terms that I had never heard before. I'm going to go to the first one, stalker syndrome. Another part of the book that just, again, hit home for me. Can you explain what stalker syndrome is?
When I think about young people specifically, entry-level jobs, they want to get experience in the workplace. Sometimes, an entry-level position isn't fancy, it isn't high level, there's no decision-making power there. They were stocking on a shelf, at a supermarket or a store of some sort. They are stocking shelves, and that is what they're doing, which means they're physically able to, but then maybe they're doing like data entry or something entry level. It really basic level is what I mean by that. And it's fine when you're gaining that experience and you are in fact entry level. The problem becomes that many disabled people have this experience is that that becomes their lifelong trajectory. There is no moving up. There is no becoming a manager or getting in those higher level spaces where there's higher level thinking, critical thinking skills involved in making decisions. And so that syndrome, people become comfortable, they become satisfied, and that's it. Not only the disabled person, but people employing the disabled person. And they think, well, I have a job, I'm good, it's good enough. But it's not really an opportunity. It's not a career, it's a job. And a career and to move up that ladder and that hierarchy, there's mentoring involved, more investment and lots of things. And so lower expectations seem to contribute to that syndrome. And so that's what I mean by that.
Yeah, again, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak a little bit more than I did last time. And the reason why this one hit me was when I was growing up trying to get employment, it was always about, almost to your point, stocking shelves, but not customer facing. So when I read that part and the whole employment
Mhm.
part, it just, again, brought back memories. And I'm very gracious and glad and blessed that I was able to have a very good career. But it's almost like the disability tax. It was a little bit more of an effort. And I want to read another quote from your book. The history of disabled people in the workplace is largely one of exclusion or regulation to entry-level jobs without the opportunity for promotion, as you had already said. What is often missing in these conversations is the difference between having a job and having a career. And I think everything you said was exactly right. The mentorship and the lack of leadership, a lack of representation in the leadership roles still a pretty big gap. Would you say that?
It's huge. I would.
Yeah, absolutely. Another syndrome that I had never heard the term for was helper syndrome. Again, another part, and again, I want to remind everyone that we're on with Dr. Stephanie Cawthon, who came out with the book, who's come out with the book, Disabilities Human. You need to get right on your favorite place to buy a book and get it immediately. It's a fantastic book. But when I read helper syndrome, again, another part that was like, wow. Can you explain what that is?
Well, it might be a little more difficult for people to even recognize it in themselves. So when you see someone who might need help, they may be struggling with whatever it is. Often our first response is to go and do it for them. Let me help, let me take care of it. And not even ask, just do or take the thing, move the thing, whatever helping looks like in that scenario that you're thinking of. And so again, the thing about self-determination and communication, how you ask the question, how you offer that, take a step back and realize that it's not about me helping you. It's as if the person is an object, right? Instead, have the person maybe take a pause and offer support to make sure that that person agrees with it or that they have an option, but like ask the question. Don't just do it and do the helper thing. Sometimes it's really hard to stop. Sometimes it's super subtle. It depends on the area in our life, in the social world, personal, wherever you are. If you're a doctor, nurse, interpreter, teacher, that role already lends itself to being a helper. Helping is an action. That's what you're doing. It's part of your job. And so helper syndrome, though, is bigger than that. It's not only about doing the helping, it's about doing it without the offer or even without the ask. And then also about how you engage with the person with the disability through the process of potentially ending up helping. And so it's very hard. It's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Yeah, again, a personal story. I have friends that I've known for years, and I like working on cars, mini bikes, whatever, anything mechanical. And if I have a wrench in my hand, they will immediately take another wrench and think I can't get the other, nut and bolt, that I can't get the other. I have my tricks. Sometimes my reaction to that isn't nice, I guess is I'm not trying to say I don't punch anybody, but I it's frustrating. Is that a common thing? I mean, maybe I'm asking to sit down and maybe I should get some of these feelings out, but is it common to be frustrated or just get tired of all the helpers that I don't even know how to articulate this question other than I've lived it. And I just, I want to expand on that a little bit.
I think because I work with young people, I see it as a developmental issue. And one developmental issue sort of feels like, someone is just used to their parents or their teachers or whoever their service provider is always helping and doing for them throughout their developmental years. And then they arrive to adulthood and that's what they know. And now they're like, wait, you always did it for me. Like, where are you? So, as a result of being helped too much without their engagement, without their agency, they just don't have that internal piece of self-determination, um, of empowerment. And so I think that's the result of all of the helping. So I see that. And I know that people, adults who have experienced that, again, it's kind of a gray area and it's not
Yeah.
it's common, but it does seem reflective of attitudes, and it's almost like that you can't do something. I need to do it for you because you can't. So it's sort of reflective of that attitude, and that becomes internalized. Um, and it's not necessarily true. In fact, it's not even always a conscious thought that you're doing it or on the receiving end of it, but it's the behavior that seems reflective of the attitude. And so kind of how do we take a look at ourselves, um, and kind of navigate how to not self-check, that's not what I want to say, but like become self-aware when you see like yourself wanting to help. It's like, how much are we doing? You know, what is the disabled person's perspective? Where are they coming from? How much can they do? How much do they actually need help with? Um, it's not always about their So, the phrase, nothing about us without us, right? So I think that includes us helping or being helped. It needs to be an us thing, not just one person doing it for the other. It needs to be an us thing when we engage in that.
I appreciate that answer because I never considered it from the other perspective, thinking, hey, what if someone, unlike me with my parents, what if someone was helped at every point in their life and then they go out into the world and expect it and continue it and look for it. So thank you for that. That helped my perspective. That's why I say this book changed my perspective and my thoughts on something I've lived with. So again, thank you. I know we're getting up on the time, but I want to ask you one last question here because I just love this quote. ADA is the floor, not the ceiling. And I know that that was a pretty famous and that went viral. What do you mean by ADA is the floor and not the ceiling?
For people who don't know about disabilities or access, the Americans with Disability Act seems to, if it's sufficient, it's there. It's legally required. It's access. It's there. We can't discriminate. We have to do this. We have to give opportunities. We're good. Like, check, we're done. But what we've learned in the past 30, 35 years now, I guess, it's not enough. It's the outcomes of just following that being sufficient is not good enough. It does not help us achieve the larger goals. It's not, things are not accessible enough. We are not able to achieve goals. We are not able to have academic equity or employment equity. The basic level access doesn't cut it. And the immediate outcomes and opportunities aren't there when just providing that basic piece. So the legal piece is 100% absolutely important. Yes, that's the floor. You can't build a house without a floor. So yes, we need the floor. Keep the floor, but it does not replace the house. It is just the floor. The house is all the other things, the attitudes, the opportunities, the technology, all of the things, all of our resources. It takes all of that to have equal access at home, at school, at work, out in the world. And so that's a little bit more about what I mean about that.
Great quote. Thank you again for your time again. And I just want to remind everyone about Disabilities Human, fantastic book. And you were on the podcast one other time on April 8th of 2025. I would highly recommend everyone listen to that first episode. But I want to thank you for your time and certainly Amanda Ford and Stephen Nugent. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking the time to be on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the We're Not Stumped podcast. I have an ask for everyone that got to this point of the podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe. The reason is simple. These stories need to be shared. It would help it to get out there to the people that really need to hear these stories.